Chrissy's big cheesy grin now. We always got a cheesy.
Thanks for opening the meeting, Trish, and thanks, Chris, for asking me to share. Doing a top table share never really gets any easier. Like, I spend the entire day with one half of my brain telling me I haven't got a message and, I'm going to get here and I'm not going to have anything to say. I mean, I never get anywhere when I don't have anything to say, so I don't know why I think I'm going to sit in front of you guys and have nothing to say. But I just sat in on the group consciousness meeting, and it's like, it gets quite heated sometimes. There's a lot of, passionate people in this fellowship, and I believe that that's because, this rescued certainly me, and I'm guessing the other people that sat in this room tonight, from the gates of insanity or death. And they're big words, aren't they? I absolutely was killing myself before I picked up a 12-step programme, and I was lucky to be alive as it was. I walked into the room and I was broken as a human sort of concern, really. I couldn't cope with responsibility anymore. I couldn't get through my day without drinking or using. I couldn't be a mum, I couldn't be a partner, I couldn't be a daughter, I couldn't be an employee. I'd gone from being a functioning human to just useless and not really wanting to be here anymore. I didn't quite have the guts to kill myself, not sober anyway. But I couldn't see a way out of my situation. And I remember looking at my mum just before I kind of picked up the phone to a helpline, and I just said to her, I think I'm losing my mind. Like, that's the only explanation that I can find for what's happening, because it didn't seem to matter what I said or what I did. As soon as anybody's back was turned, I was off, and I was powerless. I didn't know I was powerless. So, I'll just try and share a little bit of how it was and how it is today, and I hope that somebody gets something from what I say, I guess. As a kid, I hear people kind of share from their childhood. I don't know whether or not I felt any differently to anybody else, because I don't know how everybody else was feeling. I thought I did. I thought I had everybody licked. I thought everybody felt comfortable in their own skin other than me. And I was always quite outgoing. I was a bit of the class clown. I spent a lot of time outside of the classroom door looking in, because I clicked quite early that, if you can make people laugh and behave like a bit of a pillock, then people generally like you and they're kind of warm to you. So I remember spending 3 months of my GCSE year sat between classrooms in English, because I wasn't allowed in either classroom, so just distracted everybody. So I had to sit in this cupboard and listen to what was happening in my English class. But I had a real focus when I was younger. I was, by the time I was 14, I was competing semi-professionally in show jumping, and I spent the whole of my childhood from kind of 6 to 14, and that was my entire life. I worked really hard at it. I'm an addict, so I don't do things by halves. I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I was out, I was in all weathers, I did it all myself. We weren't a rich or privileged family. We were a normal working class family, but my family supported me in what I wanted to do. And I was there at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I came back from school and I was there till 10 o'clock at night. And life was good. I grew up outdoors. I had a purpose, I suppose. I felt like I belonged to something, and really enjoyed it. And it was on my 14th birthday that life really began to change for me. Life hit, I guess. And, I'd lost my dad and things when I was 12, and that was obviously very difficult, but I wasn't close with him. And on my 14th birthday, I was dragged from my bed by my mum and told we had to leave where I was living. And obviously I was a bit disorientated, and I remember saying to my mum, well, my stepdad, who I called Dad, where's Dad? And she said, he's not coming. So my mum put me in a car and took me half a mile up the road to a house of a man that I vaguely recognised, that my mum was now with. And it was, I never really processed any of this. I never cried, I just got on. And I remember being in this house and watching my mum for the next 5 years be systematically taken apart by that man. you know, he never raised a hand to her. He didn't need to. He emotionally abused my mum, and by the time she left him, she wasn't really recognisable to the person that had walked through that door. But anyway, my horses had to go, and life just changed dramatically, like what felt like in 24 hours. And you know, it was a pretty horrible place to live. You know, he was an alcoholic, he was abusive, he tried to be like that with me, and I told him to fuck off. And I remember my mum just coming and begging me to go and apologise. Please go and put this right, because I used to call him a cunt and everything. Like, just leave me alone. I don't want nothing to do with you. I remember my mum coming and just pleading with me, please go and apologise to him, because if I didn't, it was going to mean a whole night of hell for her. And I just said, I'm not doing it. If you want to live with him, that's your deal. I'm not doing it. So I didn't want to be at home. So I spent a lot of time out and about with people that were older than me. You know, looking back, I was clearly bodily different when I took alcohol and drugs to everybody else. I didn't know that at the time. And I didn't know that I was fixing something in me. I just knew that other people were doing it. I was going to do it as well. But when I did it, I got really, really trashed. And I couldn't remember where I'd been. I couldn't remember what I'd done. I'd wake up and there'd be like a bonfire next to me, and I'd be in some woods and there'd be people, and I'd be like, I've no idea where I am, but I think I probably better get home. You know, at the time you're young, you've got no responsibilities. You don't really, you know the difference between right and wrong, but it's all fun, isn't it? There's no consequences, I guess. And, you know, that went on for a long time. And, you know, I'd love to tell you that it was always awful, but it wasn't. I had some really good times going out with my mates and drinking and doing all that jazz, and it was good. I guess as I started to get older, I started to snowball chaos with me, and I got into a relationship at 17 years old with my oldest daughter's 15, and I got into a relationship with her dad, who, whilst I would never want to label anybody that hasn't chosen to walk into the rooms looking back, was a candidate for AA, absolutely. You know, picking him up off pub floors, disappearing for days, wet in the bed, all of that sort of stuff. And I remained in that relationship for 9 years, and had a child with that person. And it was like a car crash. It was a nightmare. You know, it was, you know, the rows. I got pregnant with Emma. I was drinking when I was pregnant. My personality changes when I drink, so it was really quite volatile. There was a lot of dramatic face slaps in the middle of pubs. I cut my wrist because fucking not paying enough attention to me, so I'll take, you know, it was just absolutely bonkers behaviour. But I couldn't, if you'd have told me at the time that I had a problem with substances, I would not have believed you. I was going to work, I wasn't drinking in the morning, I wasn't drinking every day even. I was a binge drinker, and I was young, and it was all fun and it was fine. And I remember getting pregnant with my eldest, and I remember distinctly, I've actually had that thought of, I'm not going to be on my own anymore. You know, I'm going to have this baby, I'm not going to be on my own anymore. And I believe that I really genuinely thought this baby was going to fix whatever pain I had in there, because I was in pain by now. And what a huge responsibility to put on a tiny baby. Like, I was 21, and this baby was going to fix me. And I went through the pregnancy, not very responsibly, went into Milton Keynes Hospital, had Emma, they handed me this baby, and I was like, fuck, now what? I don't even know how to change a nappy. I can't even look after myself. How on earth am I going to look after this baby? And I was so scared. I didn't bond with my daughter straight away. I loved her, but I was so wrapped up in fear. It was very difficult to try and operate and do anything else. And you know, there was the real selfish, self-centred part of me that was more concerned with the fact that everybody else was going out and I was on my own, and I was young and I should be able to go out. I mean, you know, I should be able to go out at 21. Why the hell won't my mum have this baby overnight? You know, I was so entitled. And you know, it was a really, really tough time for me. And Apologise. Yeah, so anyway, I became a mum, realised that, you know, not having a child wasn't what was wrong with me. And, you know, I dragged Emma up with me for quite a few years before I came into this fellowship. And I really managed to get myself together for quite a long time. I wasn't drinking, I was exercising like 4 or 5 times a week, so I was channeling my alcoholism and addiction into something else. I was really healthy, and you know, I really sort of managed to get it together. I had a good job, and then drugs came back into my life. And boy, did drugs come back into my life. They were put in front of me, and I started to drink and do cocaine like I'd never drank and done cocaine before. This was probably it was probably about 9 years ago, and as I say, I started to do alcohol and drugs like they were going out of fashion. I started to lie about my drinking. I started to drink, and then when my ex used to come home, I can remember a couple of occasions where I said I've had night nurse, that's why I'm slurring. And then I'd ring people to tell them I'd had night nurse and that's why I was slurring. Like, I wouldn't keep it under the radar. I'd ring my sister, I'd be like, oh no, I started pissed, don't I? It's weird. You know. So, you know, that was my favourite thing, was ringing people and then trying to remember who I'd phoned in the morning. So all the way back then, a long time before I thought I had a problem with drink or drugs, I can see now that things were really starting, the progression of the illness was beginning to take a hold. And I started doing coke, you know, I'd be up sort of 3-4 nights in a row and going to work and like seeing things out the corner of my eyes. And I had a fit, a really bad fit on coke, and I woke up and I couldn't remember who anyone was. My mate was saying to me, what's my name? I was like, I don't know who you are. And looking back on that, how easily could that have been really severe brain damage? You know, I could have swallowed my tongue and died, but I could have really seriously done to myself some lasting damage. But my response to that was not, I am never doing coke again. My response to that was, ring Frank, the helpline, find out why I had the fit so that I don't do that again. So I rang Frank, and they were like, what was your temperature doing? Were you really cold or really hot? I was like, it was really hot. And they were like, well, it's a temperature-induced fit. You've overdosed. Right, okay, well, I won't. We've still got some left, so I won't do quite so much this time. So slightly warped thinking. And then I got pregnant with my youngest, who's now 6 years old. And I did stop drinking and drugging when I was pregnant with her. And I really, you know, I was in a very different situation. I always thought I had a real kind of breakdown after my eldest was born. A really bad breakdown when Emma was born. I tried to kill myself when she was 3 and nearly succeeded. I was resuscitated in the ambulance. But I thought it was because of all of my outside set of circumstances. You know, I had a partner who was just constantly smashed and pissing our wages up the wall and disappearing off for days, and I was young, and I felt like I didn't have the life skills to be able to do it. I thought that's why I had the breakdown. Then I had Alana, and whatever breakdown I thought I had with Emma, times that by 50, and we're kind of where we are after I had Lana. And about 6 weeks after Alana was born, I'd already started drinking in the evening. I wasn't breastfeeding. I'd already started drinking in the evening, like bottles of wine, and eyebrows were beginning to be raised about the fact that I was drinking every single night and getting ratty if I didn't have my wine. But when she was, it was about 6 weeks, and I walked downstairs, and to this day I don't know what persuaded me to do it, but I went to the medicine cabinet and I looked up. There was a bottle of whiskey, and whiskey was what my first ever blackout drink. I didn't drink whiskey. I was really, really sick on that. I've never drunk it since. Hate the smell of it and everything. I saw this whiskey and I just thought, I'm going to have a swig of that. And it was about 10 o'clock in the morning. And I just took it down and I just drank out of this bottle and just went, oh, that's better. And I didn't know that I was feeling bad before, but I knew I definitely felt better afterwards. And that from that day forward, I actively medicated on drink throughout the day. My oldest was still going to school in Newport Pagnell because we'd moved. So I was drinking during the day, and then I was going to pick her up from school and drive back. So I was trying to stagger my drinks. Right, I'll drink that then, and then I'll have a slice of ham, so that will soak up the alcohol from the morning. Can't eat too much because otherwise the effect of the alcohol won't hit on the next. And it was just the thought process that went on around it was just crazy. And I kind of managed to continue to function-ish for a little while. And it, again, the progression of the illness just got to the point where it was like I started to have to ring people. I'd ring my mother-in-law, I'd ring my ex, I'd ring my mum, say I can't look after the kids. I can't go to the school. I was beginning to turn up at school drunk. The teachers started calling me in to ask questions. My eldest had obviously been going to school and talking to them about some of what was going on. And I was very honest with the teachers as well, actually. I was quite honest about the fact that I wasn't well. And it got worse and worse, and I was waking up on the kitchen floor in blackout. I had a big bruise on my face, I'd disappear off. Nobody'd know where I was. I remember my mum saying they just drove round bridges just looking to see if I'd chuck myself off because my behaviour was just so erratic by that point. And I remember my mum saying to me, if this doesn't stop, you're going to have to go to, it was a sister fellowship that she recommended, it's the one that's best known, which is AA. And I said, don't worry, Mum, I'll be all right. I don't know why I thought I was going to be all right. I hadn't been all right for 2 years, but I was like, don't worry, I've got this. And the second my mum's back was turned, I was back up the shop again. And I was drunk when I phoned the helpline. I was pissed. And I remember ringing, and I remember the conversation. It was quite bizarre because I was in blackout that day, and that conversation is all I remember. But I remember who picked up the phone. I can still remember her name. I remember the conversation that we had, and I remember her saying to me, do you want me to come to your house? And I said, no, but I will come to a meeting. And she said, if you come to this meeting, and it was a Kettering Sunday night meeting, she said, I'll meet you outside, and I will take you in, and I will introduce you to people. And it's the only memory I have of that day. And I went to that meeting, pissed. And that was the beginning of my journey with recovery. And I'd love to tell you that I walked into that meeting, I had a white light moment, and I've been sober ever since. And that was absolutely not the case for me. Meetings were a really great opportunity to drink because I could get out of the house, could drive myself there. I could pick up some alcohol on the way, go to the meeting, drink on the way home, pick up a McDonald's to hide the fact that I've been drinking. So I was still using it as a tool to be able to get out of the house and drink, but I kept going. I kept going to meetings, and I started to hear things like, that I was powerless over the first one. And I thought that was a great excuse to drink, so I went and said to my mum, I can't help it. It says I'm powerless. Hadn't really looked past that to the fact that there was a solution to my problem. But I started to build relationships with people in fellowship. I got a sponsor. I only really phoned that sponsor when I was pissed to talk about the 12 steps in the book. And I was like, I'm reading this bit in the book. She's like, yeah, I'm really sober. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I used to phone it when I was pissed. And but I didn't put the drink or the drugs down. But I did just keep going back to meetings, and I must have been a really frustrating prospect for people in the rooms, because I had all the answers when I went in there, and I was like, that's it, I'm done now, I'm not going to do it again, and I'd be straight out, I'd be pissed again. But I started to learn about myself, and my last drink was, my mum was really, really poorly, and my mum had to have a bypass of her aorta. And I was on anti-abuse at that point. I'd gone to CRI, and they'd put me on anti-abuse, and my mum had gone into Leicester Hospital to go and have the surgery done, and I accidentally left my anti-abuse at home when I went to stay with my stepdad. So I don't need that. I'll go and stay with him. I'm going to be absolutely fine. There was a really good chance that my mum wasn't going to come out of that surgery, and they said, it's massive. There's a sort of 20 to 30% chance that she's not going to make it through. I think it was about a 9-hour surgery or something like that. And my mum came out of surgery and she went into intensive care, and I walked into intensive care half cut. And I remember I just looked into my mum's eyes, and she just looked back at me, and my mum couldn't speak at that point, but the look on her face was just like, what are you doing? You're drunk. And I just put my hand on my mum's arm. It's all right, Mum, I've not been drinking. So I walked out of there, And I looked at my stepdad and said, I'm going to go home. I'm going to get the train home. And he's like, you are going to get the train home, aren't you? I said, yeah, I'm going to get the train home, yeah. He dropped me off at the station. I waited for the car to go. I walked straight out the station. The fuck it button had gone. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly. I walked straight out the train station to the next door, the neighbouring pub. Got completely and utterly plastered and disappeared in Leicester on my own, refusing to tell anybody where I was. So my stepdad's got his wife there, recovering from a massive operation. My stepsister's trying to support my stepdad, and I'm off doing God knows what. I'm throwing my bank card in the road, the phone's going. Fortunately, somebody in the pub sat down and literally walked around Leicester with me that day and looked after me until my stepsister got there. And he just said, Dawn arrived, and he said, here's her bank card, she's been throwing that in the road, here's her phone, it smashed a bit, she's been throwing that in the road, you know. And she just put me in the back of the car, and she's just like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? My personality, when I put drink or drugs into my system, was just any sense of kind of responsibility or giving a shit about anybody just went completely out the window. I just don't care. I just want the next drink or the next line or whatever it is, and I'll walk over anybody to get it. And I was full of guilt and remorse the next day, obviously. And I went crawling into a meeting. And I don't know what it was that clicked for me. I think it was just like a gut level acceptance. I knew I was an alcoholic. I didn't know that I was an addict. And I'd reserved for myself the opportunity that I could continue to do coke. And I calendared it in. I've shared it before. I decided I was going to do coke once a quarter because, you know, primary purpose, they can only talk about alcohol and that kind of shit, so it's all right. And you know, I found out the hard way that actually, as soon as I think somebody shared before, their drug bone's connected to their drink bone, or my drink bone's connected to my drug bone. So if I do coke, I'm off doing alcohol as well. You know, the two just go together. It just activates that part of my brain, and I'm off. And I just accepted from some gut level that, do you know what, I just can't do this anymore. I am never going to be in the back of a stretch Hummer on the way down to London with a glass of champagne in my hand. That ain't going to happen anymore. You know, that kind of drinking went out the window years and years and years ago. My drinking now is me stood in a kitchen with a bottle of vodka in my hand, drinking the vodka, puking on the floor, mopping it up, and then drinking some more. That's what my drinking was like at the end. You know, there was no glamour, no laughs, no fun, nothing. My eldest daughter couldn't even look at me anymore. She loved me, but she didn't trust me. She couldn't trust me to even come home. She couldn't trust me to pick her up from school when she's got her friends staying over and not be in blackout. And I just had that clarity over what was happening, and it was, you know, it's almost like I'd kind of been taken away, and I looked at this situation and I just thought something's got to change. And I started to do what was suggested properly, and I started to hit my knees in the morning. And in the beginning, my prayers in the morning was, please, God, please don't let me go to the shop today. Let me stay sober just today. You know, it was, I didn't pray for anyone else. I just prayed for that. Just like white knuckle, please don't let me do that. And at night, you know, it was a thank God I can put my head on the pillow, and I can put my head on the pillow. And I started to get to meetings more and more regularly. I started to get involved in some service work. I started to do, like, I was secretary at one of the meetings. I started to call people in the fellowship and reach out to people. I started to go through the book with my sponsor. I went through and did, because it used to really piss me off, because she always used to send me back to step 1 every time I got pissed. It's like, fuck's sake. I was like, I want to do my step 4 and 5, but she kept sending me back to step 1 because I hadn't admitted I was powerless. I hadn't admitted that, you know, I couldn't take that first one. But I started to go through my steps. I started to do my step 4 and 5 and have a look at my character defects and do all of that sort of stuff. And I started to learn some stuff about myself. And what I started to learn was all of that chaos that I'd been living in for all of those years, that I absolutely, hand on heart, thought was other people's fault, I created. I was the one that was in that relationship. Nobody made me be there. Nobody made me stay with that person for 9 years and allow them to treat me the way that they did. Nobody, you know, I mean, I remember going through my step 5 with my current sponsor, and I said to her, I've got a resentment with my ex because he brought drugs into my life, you know. I was clean. I used to get high off a mocha. And I said, I fucking had this conversation with her on the sofa. I said, he brought drugs into my life. I said, I didn't even know any dealers, so I couldn't have possibly have gone and got it. And she just looked me square in the face. She was like, you could have said no. I was like, yeah, I could have said no. Yeah. I did say no the first time. You know, and I got to learn a little bit about myself, and I realised, and I kind of, through working the steps and going through the book, that the drinking and the drugging was never really my problem. My thinking was my problem. My addict head, my, you know, self-obsessed nature. You know, I'm the centre of my own universe. You know, this baby's going to fix me. Why can't I go out? Why have I got to stay in with this child while everybody else goes out and has fun? Why can't I have that promotion? Why can't, you know, and it's, I'd kind of lived in this sickness for a long time. And what recovery's allowed me to do is it allows me to flip my thinking regularly, and eventually that becomes kind of normal. So if I'm feeling angry or I'm feeling judgmental, I really have to sit and look at that now and say, what I really need to be practicing is patience, loving, kind, tolerant, you know, and extend that to that person. If I'm feeling fearful, I need to hit my knees and ask God to remove it, and have some faith in a higher power, and a faith that there's a plan for me that's bigger than me. And when I look back on my life, if I'd have got my way in everything that I'd wanted, I wouldn't be where I am today. You know, there's a bigger plan, there's a bigger picture. I just don't know what it is. You know, and I just have to have some faith that whatever that kind of plan is, as long as I'm putting the next best foot forward, doing the next right thing, and being a good person. I mean, spirituality to me, when I came in, they told me it was a spiritual program of action. I never had a problem with the God word. I'm not religious, I haven't been brought up in a religious household, but I am prepared to believe that there are laws guiding this world that are bigger than me, that I don't understand, that make the tides go in and out, that make the sun come up, that make the moon come up, that make the honeybees pollinate the flowers. I found a really easy concept to grasp. I didn't know how to tap into that power because I'd never done that. So that people taught me about prayer. People taught me that if I'm sitting in self and I'm feeling angry, then that's going to block me off from that power, and I'm going to start feeling sick again. And they kept it really simple for me in the beginning. And I always, like I say, I was down with that. And today, spirituality is really simple for me. It's just about being a good person, honest, kind. And the bad news is, when you've been in recovery for a little while and you start being a bit dishonest because you want to get your own way over something, it becomes very uncomfortable because you know that you're doing it. And I've experienced that in recovery as well. You know, I learned that I had this kind of, and I always kind of do it here because that's where my anxiety used to sit, a spiritual sickness that got bigger as I got older. You know, and I believe that I was born with a concept of God when I was a child, and I moved away from that, further and further away from it as I did, you know, with drinking, drugging and bad behaviour. What this program's allowed me to do is just come back around and move a little bit closer back to that. And now I get to walk around each day and hope that if somebody finds out that I'm in Cocaine Anonymous, this is how my sponsor puts it, and I think it's a really good way of putting it, am I behaving in a way that is becoming of somebody that's working a 12-step program? It's attraction, not promotion. So if I approach somebody at work and I'm an arsehole at work, and I say to that person, oh, you've got a problem with drugs, do you want some help with that? No thanks, you're an arsehole. I don't want anything, I don't want what you've got. You know, I have to live and breathe this program in every aspect of my life. my experience has been, if I do those things, good things come back. You know, so yeah, that's it. I'll shut up because otherwise I'll ramble.
Thank you.